All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome, everyone, to the X Zone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free, 800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV, and our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. A little bit of news before we get to our guest of this hour. Number one, the new X Zone store is now open at www.thexzonestore.com. You can get all your favorite merchandise from, let me see, the X Zone Radio TV show, Paragators. I think they have Haunted Kitchens up there, too, as well. Every show that we've done, every show that we do on radio and television is featured at thexzonestore.com. That's www.thexzonestore.com. And the rel-mar multimedia app, where you can listen to the X Zone Radio show, the X Zone TV show, the X Chronicles newspaper, as well as a host of other very exciting parts of this great app, is available on the Apple Store, Google Play, and Amazon. My guest this hour is Larry E. Arnold. And after leaving Lafayette College and a career in engineering, Larry founded Parascience International in 1976 to pursue the exploration of Fortean anomalies and consciousness. His controversial article, published in August of 1978, titled Meltdown at TMI2, would 8 months later be termed by the New York Times uncannily accurate in presaging the future of that nuclear meltdown near his home. An author of three pioneering books, The Parapsychological Impact of the Accident at 3 Mile Island, that was in 1980, The Reiki Handbook in 1982, and Ablaze, The Mysterious Fires of Spontaneous Human Combustion in 1995. He is regarded by some as the world's expert on spontaneous human combustion, and consequently by others as a world-class fool. I don't think that's appropriate here, so we're just going to take that last statement with a grain of salt. He is the director of Parascience International, and they're located in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and his website is www.parascience.com. And Larry E. Arnold, welcome to the X Zone.
Thank you, Rob. It's a delight to be with you and your audience this evening and doing future broadcasts.
Yeah, I've got to tell you something, Larry. After reading your bio and the information that our research department gave us, you are no fool.
Well, that's so kind of you to say. We will graciously accept.
What was the catalyst in your life that took you away from engineering to the director of Parascience International?
Well, we always grew up with an interest in science and studying things that hopefully would lead to new understanding and new knowledge. And when we left the engineering profession, by that time we were getting interested in aspects of human consciousness, the metaphysical field, back in the late 60s and early 70s. And part of that interest led us into physical phenomena that seemed to be ignored or facilely dismissed by mainstream academia. And one of those areas that grabbed our attention rather early was the subject of unusual fire phenomena. Back in the late 60s and early 70s, when we made this drastic career change, lots of people were studying UFOs, lots of people were tracking around woods looking for Bigfoot and so on. But we couldn't find anybody who was looking into this phenomenon of mysterious fires, which we had read about earlier in our life when we were about 8th grade. And so we thought, was there something to this body of alleged material about paranormal combustion events, or were the writers that we read in our junior high school years making up the stories? We ended up going to the Library of Congress looking for original source material. We found it. There seemed to be something absolutely credible about these mysterious fires, particularly those that consumed human bodies almost to powder in an environment that was otherwise largely devoid of heat and flame damage.
You say we. Who is the we?
We as a personal reference. We speak of ourselves in the first person plural.
I see. All right. It was just a little confusing there for me for a second, but I'm glad we clarified it. Larry, you and I have to take our first 2-minute commercial break. Please stand by. Looking forward to this very interesting hour with you, my friend. Exo Nation, Larry E. Arnold is our guest this hour. All of them are. www.parascience.com is the website. And Parascience International is located in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Once again, www.parascience.com. This is the X Zone, a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard, Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern on the X Zone Broadcast Network and our growing family of broadcast affiliates worldwide. My name's Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. Larry E. Arnold and I will return on the other side of this 2-minute break as we continue investigating the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology. Don't go away. Larry E. Arnold is our special guest this hour, Exonation. He is the director at Parascience International. Their website is www.parascience.com. All right, you were talking about spontaneous human combustion during the intro. And what is SHC? You know, how would you describe spontaneous human combustion?
This is our definition of the phenomenon, which is derived from 4 decades of studying cases that fit the definition. Spontaneous human combustion is the smoking, blistering, or burning of human flesh in the absence of contact with a known external flame, caustic chemical, radioactive material, high amperage electricity, or nearby radiant heat source. Those are the 5 categories that mainstream fire science says can start a fire or cause flesh to burn or blister. If you can rule out those 5 categories at a fire scene, then you're looking at something that history has called spontaneous human combustion.
Now, I've heard about it, and I've seen pictures of it, but I've never actually talked to someone who's investigated the phenomenon. So take us through the history of spontaneous human combustion, when it was first evidenced, and when has been the latest case of SHC.
The earliest account that we have found that fits the definition of spontaneous human combustion in the medical literature dates to about the latter part of the 1400s.
Wow.
And that involved a knight named Polonus who was observed to exhale flame and was promptly consumed, according to the medical reports. That was obviously highly debated at the time. Could that really have happened? In the 17 and early 1800s, this was, again, a very hotly debated subject within the mainstream medical community, because people were burning up in an extraordinarily thorough manner in an environment that was devoid, as we said earlier, of the traditionally expected high heat and flame damage. Bodies were burned more completely than you can cremate a body today in a retort. And yet surrounding combustible materials like straw or wicker furniture, sometimes even the clothing on the victim herself, was not consumed by the fire, quote-unquote fire, that consumed the body itself. Then around 1850, a German chemist named von Liebig decided he'd conduct an experiment in which he tried to burn a cadaver to see if he could replicate such a scene as had been reported to him and to other physicians. He could not do it, and therefore he said that spontaneous human combustion simply can't occur. And his mindset has become the de facto standard ever since the mid-1850s, until our research really dug into the phenomena and began to provide not only the historical but the photographic evidence that these kinds of incredibly anomalous, fearsome, frightening fires do occur and deserve explanation.
What is the scientific explanation, and how can this be proven to be fact?
The scientific, quote-unquote, explanation that is most often proffered to explain away these cases of human incineration is what is called the human wick effect, which is basically the human body becomes an inverted candle, where the wick becomes the victim's clothing, the wax of the candle, the tallow becomes the adipose tissue in the human body. And of course, the body is externally ignited to begin with, and then the heat and the low energy flame begins to consume the clothing, which wicks out the fat in the adipose tissue. And after many long, agonizingly slow hours, the body slowly immolates to a pile of powder. That's the official explanation. However, we have attempted to do that under controlled laboratory-type conditions numerous times. We can't get the experiment to work to that end. We have watched other experts on television, naysayers who say that Larry Arnold doesn't know what the heck he's talking about when it comes to SponCom, tried the same experiment with sometimes laughable failure, to the point where they actually are burning down the entire burn chamber which the experiment is being conducted. And frankly, we say if it were that easy to burn a body almost wholly to powder, why do not crematorium operators, who after all are businessmen who need to make a profit during the service that they're providing the client, why don't they just take the cadaver that is brought to them, lay a lit cigarette on it, walk away, have lunch, come back a couple hours later, and they're going to find their customer, so to speak, is now a pile of dry powder, and they don't have to spend $120,000 on retorts and cremulators and fuel oil and natural gas and air filters and all that stuff.
Right.
The fact is they can't do that. So we really do believe there's a solid mystery here. When we've spoken to fire investigators, arson investigators around the world, we're amazed first about how few of them actually know that such a fire scene can exist. Most of them have never heard about this in the fire service training. And when we show them photographs of some of the classic cases that we've been able to research personally, they're just blown away. When we've spoken to the Los Angeles Fire Department, for example, we got words like bizarre, astonishing, and amazing, and awesome. They're unprepared to know that people can burn more thoroughly than can be accomplished in a crematorium's retort, and yet surrounding, as we said earlier, surrounding combustibles like hay, clothing, furniture, and so on, even sealing directly above the point of combustion that consumes the body, is almost wholly devoid of heat and flame damage.
Let me ask you, have you yourself actually seen, right up close, a human torso that has actually been the subject of spontaneous human combustion?
We have seen the aftermath once the fire scene has been cleaned up by the first responders. We have not yet been able to get to a fire scene quickly enough to actually see the ashen remains in situ. However, we have been to, as we said, fire scenes shortly after the initial cleanup is done, but before the fire scene has been significantly disturbed, other than having the ashes shoveled out of the fire scene itself. And we can attest that these fire scenes are incredibly astonishing, incredibly bizarre, and make no common sense whatsoever to the first responders, which is oftentimes how we find out about the more recent cases. They know of our research, and when we contact them, they say, "Larry, we're just bumfuddled. We do not understand this. Come on out, help us understand what's going on here." Which, as a researcher, we really value that kind of an opportunity, because we need facts, we need data to help us and others understand how these extreme human immolations can occur, how they can be explained, and hopefully someday how they can be prevented.
So how do these SHCs self-combust?
That's the $64,000 question. What causes SHC? In our book Ablaze, we explore more than 100 possible theories as to how this might be explained. We submit firmly that these fires cannot be explained conventionally by the human wick theory, unless, with this one qualifier, if there is a biological condition in a small percentage of the human population that makes their bodies highly flammable, much more so than is the general population, then maybe we can look at some kind of external ignition source that utterly consumes these people. that aside, then we need to look at something that is far beyond what mainstream fire science teaches its arson investigators and firefighters and first responders. Whether that leads us to explore new avenues in biochemistry in the body or bioelectrical phenomena that would cause the body to immolate to the extreme extent that our research proves that can happen. Whether looking at geophysics, cosmic energies, other kinds of energies in the body that Western medicine does not yet recognize, such as Kundalini and Ki. All those, we believe, can be certainly seriously considered as possible causes to explain these human incinerations that we've documented in our book Ablaze.
Tell me, what is your fascination with SHC?
Initially, our fascination was that this appeared to be an unexplored, totally ignored phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
Once we concluded that there really is a bona fide serious mystery, a serious anomaly, a real Fortean event here, the more we tried to gain understanding and talk with firefighting experts and were rebuffed, turned away, or simply told that we can't help you because we don't know anything about what you're asking about, it became all the more intriguing to us. When we met with a senior fire investigator in the city of Philadelphia, we had several cases that occurred generally in his jurisdiction, and he told us that he had no files to show us because what we were asking about simply doesn't happen. When we put photographs on his desk and explained to him the situations that existed when these photographs were taken and how the bodies had been consumed so wholly without the presence of an accelerant, we said to him, "You're the expert. You tell us as the expert in fire science how you would explain these fire scenes to us." His response to us, we shall never forget it, was this: I'd go out, I'd get drunk, and I'd forget about it. When we have leading fire scientists take that kind of an attitude, throw that against us with an iconoclastic nature to begin with, then we're really intrigued and really captivated by what we believe is a true mystery here that is being ignored by mainstream fire science and mainstream medicine in general.
Have you been able to get samples of human ashes from these scenes and put them to any scientific testing? And if so, what have been your results?
Oh, we wish we could answer that affirmatively. We certainly have tried to do that. The problem is, oftentimes we do not find about the cases quickly enough in order to obtain, samples from the limb, the lower leg, the upper shoulder or arm that is left intact for analysis. The closest we've probably come to that occurred a year ago out in Oklahoma. In February of that year, a gentleman named Danny Van Zant died in a fire that certainly fit the concept, the definition, the criteria for spontaneous human combustion. We were in contact with the local fire authorities and the county sheriff almost immediately. By the time that we got out to Oklahoma to conduct our on-scene investigation with the department's full cooperation out there, the body clearly had been removed and was not available to us. But the rest of the fire scene was still intact. We were hoping to meet with the next of kin of the victim to, not only obtain information about his medical background, his history, but also obtain samples from inside the house, which is still obviously standing, given that this is a SHC-type fire. However, the next of kin adamantly refused our access to the property, and eventually we demanded that the local fire department burn the house to the ground in a controlled burn experiment. And even though the chief attempted to get samples for us before the controlled burn occurred, he was unable to do so because of scrutiny by the next of kin.
All right, stand by, Larry. You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Larry E. Arnold is our guest this hour, X-Zone Nation. Parascience International is his organization. He is the director. Their website is www.parascience.com. We'll be back after the news. Don't go away.
The following program may contain coarse language, violence, nudity, mature subject matter, or scenes which may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Welcome back, everyone. Larry E. Arnold is our guest this hour. His website is www.parascience.com. Larry, in your investigation into the spontaneous human combustion, have you been able to determine any common threads between all the victims?
The common thread is that all the victims are human.
That's it?
Beyond that, no. They do tend to be elderly.
Mm-hmm.
We do not find that particularly surprising. The human body tends to deteriorate with chronological experience, and we'll expect things as a person ages to go haywire biologically. That said, the youngest victim in the database is 6 weeks, a toddler in a crib. There is a possible set of cases from India last year in which the victim may have been only a few days of age, but we're not willing to, stake our reputation and research on that one yet. At the other extreme, the oldest in our database is a Hindu holy man said to be 114 years of age when he was found sitting in a lotus position on a straw mat with a blue-green flame, quote-unquote flame, emanating from the region of his solar plexus, his lower abdomen. And when the process had completed, he was said to have been consumed to powder, and yet the straw mat on which his body had been seated was itself untouched.
How many cases of SHC have you people in your database?
Repeat the question, please.
How many cases of spontaneous human combustion do you have in your database?
We're getting close to 500 now that fit the definition of the concept of spontaneous human combustion, which is quite a large number for a phenomenon that officially doesn't happen at all. Given that those cases span several hundred years, if not thousands of years, because even though, as we said earlier, the earliest medical report that we found dates from about 1470, if you look at the legends and mythology that the Romans, the Greeks, and others have left to us, we can find accounts in their traditions that certainly fit the definition of the concept of spontaneous human combustion. All that said, 500 cases, perhaps some more, divided by the number of people that had been alive over the last several hundred years, means that this is an incredibly rare phenomenon. Have we found all the cases? Certainly not, because this, as we said earlier, is a phenomenon that oftentimes the local investigators either don't want to deal with, and so don't give us the information that would lead us to suspect that this is not a normal, conventional fire death, but something that's really extraordinary that is of interest to us.
Why do you think it's so necessary to investigate this phenomenon if it's a total rarity?
Well, it's not probably as rare as the numbers would lead one to believe. As we said, we have strong evidence that there are cases that we simply have been unable to cover because they've been covered up or not reported accurately. We had a state police fire marshal here in Pennsylvania tell us that he had heard of fire marshals who actually ordered their people not to take photographs of these kinds of fire scenes because they simply did not want to deal with them. That said, there's a real mystery here about the human physiology, human biology, perhaps even involving human consciousness, associated with these very bizarre fires. And even though they're unusual and rare, we may be able to find a great deal of valuable information by studying them.
Let's go back to 1988. CBC's The Fifth Estate documented your research, and a medical examiner called all so-called evidence that was collected for SHC a hoax. Do you remember that, and what's your response to him?
We remember that episode very, very clearly. The person who made that statement was Dr. Lester Adelson. He was a medical examiner for Cuyahoga County in Ohio. And he looked at photographs that we had amassed documenting these incredibly localized human combustion fire scenes.
Right.
And he said these photographs are hoaxes. and the question was put to Dr. Adelson, well, on what basis do you declare these amazing photographs to be hoaxes? His response was, because the human body does not burn like this, therefore you can't have any real photographs, therefore the photographs are hoaxes. Well, we happen to know who the photographers were for several of the cases that he was looking at. They were newspaper editors, they were professional fire photographers, they were not hoaxing these photographs back in the 60s. This was before Photoshop and computer technology would allow you to do that. So Dr. Adelson was showing to us, even though he claimed to have written and researched the subject of spontaneous human combustion, he was showing to us his clear bias and his overwhelming ignorance and unwillingness to look at evidence that was being presented to him. Rather than say, these are amazing photographs, I've never seen anything like this before, please tell me more, I'm really curious and want to learn something, his curiosity, such as it was limited, immediately shut down any opportunity to learn something about what he was looking at by simply denying that the photographs could depict real fire scenes, which they did.
What is the reaction of the general public towards spontaneous human combustion? Is it an interesting topic? Do you get a lot of inquiries about it? How do you react to skepticism?
The general public, and particularly the fire service and medical community, still deals with this subject with a great deal of apprehension, denial, dismissal, and xenophobia. They're really frightened by this. It challenges what they have been taught and what they think they know that the human body can and cannot do to itself. We, on the other hand, say, we think we know what the human body basically can do to itself, and the photographs that we have of Mary Reeser from 1951, Dr. John Bentley in 1966, Helen Conway in 1964, and in fact Danny Van Zandt from last year in Oklahoma, tell us otherwise, that you can deny this all you want, but that's not going to make the evidence go away, and it's not going to help you learn how these fires occur and how they may be able to be prevented, how lives can be safeguarded.
So let me ask you this. If you've got the fire officials and the medical community basically shrugging their shoulders and say, oh, well, it happens, it happens. We're not interested. Why are you so interested?
Well, I guess it comes back to that iconoclastic nature of ours. And we'd rather than deny the evidence, we'd try to discover something about the evidence that we have amassed. It's a toss-up. You can be in denial, or you can be on the side of discovery, and we're going to opt for the latter.
What are you hoping to prove? What is your ultimate goal when it comes to your investigation with spontaneous human combustion?
Well, we can be flippant and say we'd like to get a Nobel Prize in medicine and perhaps physics for the documentation and the evidence that we've amassed. Beyond that, we really do believe at some point that the evidence, there's going to be a case, either the volume of cases that we have amassed and continue to collect, or there's going to be one specific event that is so overwhelmingly public that it can't be denied. And then much as happens in science, it becomes, oh, we knew about this all the time.
Go on.
We'll get to a point somewhere. If it's not us, someone down the line in the future is going to come up with the evidence that is going to finally convince everybody in the world that spontaneous human combustion is not superstition, it's not a myth, it's not something that can be facilely denied, but it's real. It happens, and someone's curiosity is going to finally come up with a solution or several solutions, and consequently, knowledge is going to be advanced. And I guess that's our ultimate goal, is to advance knowledge by studying an incredibly bizarre, and yet for us at least, utterly fascinating subject.
I can understand your fascination with it because this is your passion. But in the big scheme of things, we have global warming, we have drought, we have illnesses, we have crisis going on in the Middle East. We have the tensions between the East and the West revamping again. Do you really think that John Q. public is going to share your enthusiasm for the subject?
If John Q. Public chooses not to, we're not going to be too offended. We would like to see mainstream fire science and the medical community, though, take a much more serious interest in this. What causes the body to produce temperatures that appear to be in the range of 3,000, 6,000, perhaps even 8,000 degrees Fahrenheit instantaneously, and yet of such short duration that surrounding combustibles never reach their ignition points? We might be looking at a new source of energy here that may not go to the body, but can be applied to the general population that would eliminate nuclear power, nuclear fission reactors, perhaps. Now we're talking global warming issues.
Yes, I can see that, but when it comes to the actual event, besides the case in India that you talked about, where this 114-year-old man was seen with a blue flame emanating from his, where was it? From his
abdominal region.
Abdominal region. Have there been any documented cases, videoed, photographed, while the spontaneous combustion was actually happening?
We know of one alleged case from India in which a lady named Anna Marino was said to be emitting a bluish-purple light from her breast, a flame, if you will. And this was allegedly filmed by the attending physicians. We have been unable to track down the location of that footage, if it still exists. This was back in, if memory serves, in the 30s.
So
we
basically,
spoken to witnesses, eyewitnesses, but we don't know of any other footage, video or still, of the process actually happening.
Now let me just play the devil's advocate here. The witnesses that you've talked to, okay, they actually saw the event take place?
In some cases, yes.
Have they been subjected to any lie detector tests?
They have not.
Have they been investigated to see if they could be part of a perpetration of a hoax?
In the broadest sense, we will answer no. On the other hand, there are certain facts when we began our research that were not known to the general public, and the witnesses that we were privileged to meet with and have them tell us about their encounters, their observations, were giving us facts that were not known to the general public, that would only have been known, were very obscure, would only have been known to a dedicated researcher such as ourselves. So that's kind of one way that we can look around, getting away from the hoax scenario. Also, we have, and this comes from Canada, we have medical practitioners who have been eyewitness to this. The Canadian case happened in Brockville back in probably 1828.
1828.
1828.
Okay.
It was attested to by a Dr. Peter Schofield, who wrote it up in the Canadian Medical Journal. And it involved a town drunkard, which is interesting because at one time it was claimed that all victims of SHC were drunken sots, which is not statistically valid, but nonetheless. The gentleman was observed to be standing in a widely extended silver-colored blaze. And Dr. Schofield came upon the scene. He spoke with the eyewitness to the event who described this silver-colored flame. And Dr. Schofield himself observed the fire scene and said that there was no fire in the shop where the event occurred. Neither was there any possibility of fire having been communicated to the victim from any external source. And as he said, it was purely a case of, his words, spontaneous ignition.
Wow. Here's a question for you. You were telling us about the two cases in India. Both those cases were witnessed to have a blue flame. Yet the case in Canada, in Brockville, going back to the 1800s, was a silver flame. Now, if these three cases were all spontaneous human combustion, would the flame not be the same color?
One might think so initially, and this is one of the deep challenges of the research that we've done. We have not been able to find a consistent set of facts that link all the cases together. As we said earlier, other than the victim being human, we're kind of at a quandary as to finding any commonality. Most of the witness cases do report a bright electric blue-colored fire like you'd see at the tip of an unsettling torch. However, we do have what we believe to be credible reports of silver-colored fire, white-colored fire, blue, blue-green, purple, even gold.
Wow. Tell me, are there any cases of animal spontaneous combustion?
There are.
And
If we believe the witnesses, there are, yes. Happens to dogs, cats, farm animals.
yeah. But once again, when it comes to tangible evidence, next to none.
And that's one of the challenges of the research that has consumed 4 decades of our life.
But after 4 decades of research coming up with next to nothing, don't you find that frustrating?
Well, we certainly wouldn't say we've come up with next to nothing. We don't have, as we said, we don't have
The smoking
we
gun?
don't have videotape of the President of the United States or the Prime Minister of Canada standing behind a lectern going up in a puff of smoke. When that happens, if it happens, mainstream fire science and medicine is going to say, oh, we've known about spontaneous human combustion all along. Until then, we need to look at the scores of photographs that we've amassed, the documentation that we have collected by talking to the first responders at these remarkably bizarre and unusual fire scenes, and based on what we have accumulated over that period of time, it really does speak, unless you want to be in absolute denial, as was Dr. Adels and so many of the debunkers that we unfortunately have to deal with, it really does speak to a real phenomenon.
All right, you and I have to take our final break. Please stand by. Larry Arnold's our guest. He's the director of Parascience, parascience.com. We'll be back right after this break. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. Larry Arnold is my guest this hour. We're talking about spontaneous human combustion. Larry is the director of Parascience International, that's located in Pennsylvania, and their website is www.parascience.com. Besides spontaneous human combustion, Larry, what else does Parascience International investigate?
Well, we're certainly best known for our research into pyrophenomena, specifically spontaneous human combustion. We're also personally interested in areas around the planet that repeatedly produce or host a collection of unusual Fortean phenomena, the so-called anomaly triangle areas. We have been in the Bermuda Triangle several times. We've come back each time. So there are some strange things that happen down there, but not everybody who goes into it obviously disappears. We found a similar area that is a true triangular area in north-central Pennsylvania, in the northern part of our state, that is defined by at least 5 thermal anomalies, where water will freeze in significant quantities during the summer months when it's 80, 90 degrees. But during the winter months, when the rest of the terrain is covered in snow, these 5 areas remain ice-free. And in and around that triangle of about 27 square miles in area, a number of other Fortean phenomena have occurred, including the 1966 spontaneous human combustion of Dr. John Irving Bentley that occurred almost in the middle of that Pennsylvania triangular area. We're also intrigued by reports that we find to be quite credible and almost as unusual as spontaneous human combustion involving large winged avian creatures, so-called thunderbirds.
How many reports of thunderbirds do you get a year?
Very few.
Really?
No more than we get of spontaneous human combustion. Another extraordinarily rare phenomena. You need to develop the confidence and the trust of the witnesses to come forward and talk about both sightings of thunderbirds, because birds aren't supposed to have wingspans of 15 to 20 feet. Ornithologists will tell you such a bird doesn't exist, just as fire scientists will largely tell you that SHC doesn't exist. But
in an age in society where the technological advances are as such as everyone has a high definition video camera in their cell phone, how come are there any photos or videos of these thunderbirds, and why hasn't anybody caught spontaneous human combustion on video yet?
We'll address the latter. We're hoping that someday, and hopefully soon, that will happen. As you say, with the proliferation of cell phones and cell cameras, hopefully somebody's going to be at the right place at the right time. and capture this evidence on film as it occurs.
Just like the Bigfoot people.
Yep.
And once again, when it comes to spontaneous human combustion, the fact that, well, what evidence do you have that it's real? We've got about a minute here.
Yeah.
I need for you to convince me or give me your best shot that it's real, not a myth, not a legend.
To quote Dr. Mark Benecke, who's a forensic biologist, this is his argument as to why SHC cannot happen. He says, in forensic practice, there are no known cases in which internal organs of a burned corpse were damaged more severely than the outer parts. Therefore, SHC doesn't happen. The photographs that we have collected, specifically, let's say, of Dr. John Irving Bentley here in Pennsylvania in 1966, in which no internal organs were left, period, refutes Dr. Benecke's arguments that SHC cannot happen.
All right, but that's just one. That's just one member of the medical community.
Well, we could have filled the entire hour with you, giving you similar quotes like that.
All right, Larry, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Continued success. And Exo Nation, if you'd like more information about Larry Arnold, his website is www.parascience.com. That's www.parascience.com. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour as the X-Zone continues from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell. Don't go away.